Would like to invite you all for a networking tea break, but let me please share with you that this break is exactly for 15 minutes, and right after that we'll be starting our first session. So after 15 minutes, see you back here. Thank you so much. SARC Arbor, I would like to welcome you as well, sir. Please put your hands together for Sri Samuel Satyajit. And also we have with us the Head of Operations, India Engineering Center and Head of Consumer Engineering, Intel Security, Shri Venkat Krishnapur. I welcome you, sir. Sir is here. And last but not the least, we have amongst the panelists the CTO of Sri Equipment Finance Limited, Dr. Sundar Raj Vijayanagar. Please put your hands together for him as well. Dr. Sundar Raj Vijayanagar, is he already here on the dais? Dr. Sundar? Yeah, sir is already here. So now, friends, as we have our guest of honor on the dais, we have our session moderator, we have our speaker over here. So let's start this first session focusing on emerging technologies in cybersecurity and mobile security. Once again, my dear friends, please put a huge round of applause for all these gentlemen over here on the dais. And starting on, I would like to hand over my mic to the session moderator, Shri Siva Ramakrishnan, the partner of Cybersecurity PwC. Over to you, sir, now.
Thank you. I know that we are running slightly behind from previous sessions, plus we have 6-7 speakers, though it's mentioned about 15 minutes for each. What I thought could be useful is that we have 1 hour 15 minutes roughly to talk about it. We give an opportunity for each one of you for about 10 minutes to present. So then we'll have 15 minutes of time for a question and answer at the end for all of us. Just as a set of precedents, on 8 minutes, I'll just do this so that you know that you have another 2 minutes to go. On 10th minute, please don't, pardon me if I intervene to stop you, because we are in between lunch and the audience, so we just want to make sure that it's interesting and fruitful and also engaging with the participants. In between, any one of you, if you have any specific questions, urgent, if you don't want to wait till the last minute, please raise your hand, and depending on the flow, I'll take a call whether to let you ask a question to any of the participants. So I'll start with Mr. Berman to start his session as a chief guest. Over to you, sir.
Good afternoon. I'm really inspired by the inaugural session where there are a lot of very interesting advisories were given out. It included an advisory of no shortcuts, but we are already into taking shortcuts. So good afternoon, and thank you very much for the invite to share some of my thoughts. Some of my views would potentially be contentious. I speak for myself. These are my views alone, and not of those of my employers. Having said that, let me start with 4 reports that I would like to share with you, some of which you may know. On 14th of June last month, the Washington Post reported that Russian hackers had broken into the Democratic National Committee's information systems and accessed the entire database of the research on the GOP candidate. It was reported that this breach remained undetected for more than a year. And once this breach was detected, the attackers leaked a bunch of emails which actually embarrassed the Democratic National Committee, leading to the resignation of its chair. DNC chair was Debbie Wasserman. The second is what actually happened yesterday morning in Bangalore. The day before, there was a decision of the court which went against the government of Karnataka. There was a strike call actually given. Early morning, quite a few of us received a WhatsApp message saying that the state government had declared schools to be closed for the entire month of August. It turns out that WhatsApp message was a Photoshop snapshot of a news channel, and the news channel aggressively went about putting and flashing the message out, saying that this was actually a fake message. The third is a data point where it was estimated that the loss of data breach to businesses in 2015 had hit about $500 billion, and it is expected to grow to $2 trillion by 2019. And McAfee estimates that the loss of business in India, notwithstanding the morning session data point of 9,000 cyber attacks only reported, the loss to business in India is about 0.21% of our GDP, which is pretty high. The fourth article was written by President Obama in the Wall Street Journal in July 2012, and I quote, "Last month I convened an emergency meeting of my cabinet and top Homeland Security, intelligence and defense officials. Across the country, trains had derailed, including one carrying industrial chemicals that exploded into a toxic cloud. Water treatment plants in several states had shut down, contaminating drinking water and causing Americans to fall ill. Our nation, it appeared, was under a cyber attack. Unknown hackers had inserted malicious software into the transportation, water, and other critical infrastructures. Fortunately, last month's scenario was just a simulation. It was actually a test carried out to see how various first responders and second responders would come together to collaborate and deal with this kind of a catastrophe." So while the first incident report, which I shared with you, points to an act of nation-state adversary in indulging in cyber espionage, the second is an adversary with an objective of cyber mischief. The third category has an objective of monetary gain and cyber crime, and the fourth would be the scenario of cyber war. The morning session, the Budapest Convention, probably deals with only one dimension of this. A few insights from the above are: attackers' objectives can be classified into cyber espionage, cyber mischief, cyber crime, and cyber war. Attackers mount targeted attacks to achieve their strategic objectives. The best systems are successfully breached today. The existing huge interdependencies on our critical infrastructures, due to which it is not possible to prevent cascade failures. Impact in one leads to catastrophic impact in many. Most of these failures are initially silent. Systems continue to function from the user's perspective, but are actually in a breach state. A virtual breach today has a potential to bring about effects in the real physical world. So many of these cyber systems are now being referred to as cyber physical systems. The summit today is driven by the riveting concern that we all have for cybersecurity. But another truth is that today cybersecurity problem is not adequately solved. Though there is an increased awareness about cybersecurity and there is a serious effort to deploy security solutions, the elephant in the room is effective cybersecurity. And effective cybersecurity is the holy grail that we all search for. We continue to grapple with the rapidly increasing attack surface resulting from increasing use of information systems in everyday life. The nature of computing itself is rapidly evolving and branching. Let us consider the topics of this session itself. I'll pick 4: IoT, big data, cloud, mobile technologies. In the context of IoT, it is about embedded systems that are used for sensing, surveillance, and control. In the context of big data, it is about analytics and privacy. In the context of cloud, it is about an elastic infrastructure that processes data from multiple owners, data owners, I mean. In the context of mobile computing, it is about data store fragmentation. In each of these above, cybersecurity requirements are distinct. For some, confidentiality is paramount. For others, integrity and validity take complete precedence. Each of these branches require very careful analysis to identify threats and mitigate the appropriate risks. In security community, there is a consensus that the root cause of all risk is dependencies. Therefore, identification of dependency and the consequent risk mitigation is critical to achieving effective cybersecurity. Security safeguards for risk mitigation bring with them the ability to control the system and information flow based upon the specified security requirements or policies. Effective cybersecurity calls for security safeguards to be robust against attacks, transparent to the authorized users, opaque to the adversary, with minimal impact on system performance. All four have to be met simultaneously to deliver effective cybersecurity. The approach used for most systems today has been reactive, of fail and patch. It is one of bolt-on security onto a system that has been built without addressing security as a basic design criteria. Currently, there is no incentive to build security into systems. Security is a system property that becomes visible only when it fails. The attack it prevents and its successes are not visible, therefore neither noted nor measured. This has led to buyers not demanding it and developers not investing enough in secure engineering of systems. Nat Howard said, security will always be as bad as it can possibly be while allowing everything to still function. This is the classic market for lemons with a race to the bottom. There is no economic incentive for developers of information systems to invest in developing something that is neither being demanded nor being paid for by the buyers. In fact, there is a clear disincentive in the competitive market which does not reward a secure system which is more expensive than one that is less expensive but insecure. A bolt-on approach to inserting security results in a system that is brittle with respect to security. This security turns out to be cumbersome to use and often impacts performance. Effective cybersecurity requires that the system be architected with security requirements identified upfront, safeguards identified and built into the system to enforce the necessary policy requirements. The current reactive approach has not been able to deliver effective cybersecurity. We must change our approach. This means adopting a proactive approach to deliver effective cybersecurity. Going forward, the world is adopting information systems with the objective of achieving efficiencies, and these systems promise our Digital India initiative. Let me reword. Our Digital India initiative is actually a step in the direction to leverage these efficiencies, which are promised by information systems. The landscape of emerging technologies has today been driven by tremendous progress in computing, storage, and communication, doubling of computation every 18 months, doubling of storage every 12, and doubling of communication every 9. The amount of stored data and data in motion per compute cycle has actually increased 10 to 100-fold. This performance enhancement, coupled with low cost of information systems, has been exploited in startling ways. Today, using these technologies, $4 trillion worth of financial transactions are carried out every day, protected by public key systems. A transatlantic cable was deployed last year, which was about 6 milliseconds faster than the earlier deployed one, at a cost of $300 million. Subscribers to this cable paid up to 50 times more for using this cable, which gave them a 6 millisecond differential advantage. And this is basically being leveraged by the high frequency traders. And this forms about 40% of the European stock exchanges and 50% of the New York Stock Exchange, where robots actually do the transactions. So compare this actually with the first telegram which was sent across the transatlantic cable. It took just about 20 words, but it was transmitted in 17 hours. And Facebook and Microsoft have actually just announced last month of pairing up to deliver a still faster transatlantic cable, which will be at 160 terabytes per second. The rapid adoption of technology has had undesirable side effects. Expertise level of both designers and users is actually falling. The traditional mechanisms of building designer experience via personal experience, via creation of time-tested principles based upon lessons learned is actually invalid. Lessons learned in previous developments are often not relevant to the next development. So capacity building is a challenge. Agile capacity building is what is essential and required. Developing approaches to engineering systems with effective cybersecurity will continue to be a challenge, will require evolution of supporting governance framework for system definition, system engineering, and system assurance, and we don't have this supporting governance framework at this point. The critical dependence on information systems is a huge concern and requires secure information systems to be engineered. Complexity is actually the bane of security, and ensuring that we deliver complex systems that are analyzable and assurable for correctness is actually virtually impossible today. This is illustrated by the US government abandoning the common criteria-based security evaluation of general purpose operating system. They are of the view that it is too complex to be done within a reasonable time at a reasonable cost. The message I gave is hard to tell, hard to hear, but the reality is that there is no way to protect information systems from all possible threats. All we can do is manage risk. As a practicing engineer, I believe that we can dramatically increase our chance of finding the holy grail of effective security if we commit ourselves to robust security engineering with built-in approach to system security and a strong governance framework that incentivizes the building of secure systems. There is never enough time. I thank you for yours.
Thank you, Dr. Berman. I feel really bad to cut time of each one of you. Each one of your views are really valuable for the audience as well as to each one of us. But having said that, we do need to maintain decorum and keep the audience interest alive so that they run through the sessions till the evenings. As I suggested in the beginning, I request each of the speaker to please limit yourself to that 10 minutes. On 8, I will do twice, and then within 2 minutes, if you could close, I would really appreciate. Let me, request the next speaker to come and address us, Shrikant Shitole, the Managing Director, Symantec India. Shrikant, over to you.
I'll try to keep it as short as possible, Shiva. So then, guys, I think I've just changed the topic of my presentation because it's important that we have been talking since morning cybersecurity. Sometimes it gives basically a very controlling factor in a negative way. So let me just put a different perspective here, that how do we ensure that cyber becomes actually an enabler for all of us from the Digital India perspective, and how can we use cybersecurity to enable the business rather than controlling some of the negative aspects of that. I think with that note, I think let me start the discussion quickly. This slide is not a very big surprising slide for all of you, very dull slide as you can see, but fundamentally it talks about, okay, India is at the peak in terms of the GDP growth, the overall economic growth, and how is it happening? I think that is becoming very critical for us. I'll come back to cybersecurity slowly in next few minutes, but let me just set the tone by what we are doing as a country. I think this is what we are, so I really don't have to spell out what we are, but if you look at the population, once upon a time I think we had a very negative answer when we talk about the populations. In case if anybody asks, is India too much populated? The answer is yes. But today it's been considered as very positive aspect in terms of, yes, there's enough juice from the business perspective here as a country, as India, and that's what I think everybody is attracted for. If you look at the average age of the citizen, which will happen by year 2025, we will be I think the only country perhaps who will have more than 35%. by year 2020 or 2022, the average age of the citizen will be less than 35 years. If you look at even the connectivity piece of it, I think what has happened due to the mobility, and which has also fueled a lot of growth on the internet and the broadband and a lot of services, is about 700 million mobile users, which you're talking about on a smartphone coming actually by year 2020. And the last point which I want to leave in here, which is really actually exploding the entire country at this stage, and it will explode further in the next 3 to 5 years, is going to be the e-commerce. If you look at the conventional buying of any citizen versus the e-commerce, the pattern is changing. Today is like less than 8%, but in a span of next few years, it will go to the 15-20%, and then the amount of ecosystem impact it is going to have, right from the banking, right from the financial industries, as well as the citizen-centric services from the government perspective, is going to be enormous. I think we need to make a note of all these things in order to go to my next slide, which is talking about Digital India. These are the 9 key pillars which everybody has been talking about for the last couple of years. And I've just put all those 9 pillars here. I'm not going to explain each and every pillar here. This is for you to absorb from this slide. But what is important is that the key starting point is the broadband initiative. And that's the one actually is going to really fill in the entire Digital India initiative. And if you look at from that point of view, where are we going next? I've just put some bullet points for you to absorb that. What are we going under as a country, as a transformation from the digital perspective? And this is really going to impact all of us. The last 3, which is Skill India, Smart Cities, Digital India, and Make in India. These 4 are really very, very important activities because of that average age which I spoke just a few minutes back of the citizen. So if you're talking about 35 years and less, 35% of the population, these are the last 4 areas which are going to really fuel everything. Smart Cities, Skill in India, Make in India, and Digital India, correct? Now, what it essentially means from a technology parlance point of view. I think that's what, I'm just trying to slowly build up the tempo here and bring the attention here. It is essentially forcing us from the big data explosion point of view for the country. You all agree? And if you look at the spread which has been mentioned here in terms of what are we using this data for? These are the various areas we are using it for. And if you look at from the compliance perspective, or if you look at even from the internet text and documentation perspective, it's enormous percentages. But look at the imaging data. That's the one which is already sitting on your endpoint, which is your mobile, okay, today. Some of it is unstructured, may not be important for anybody, like your own personal photographs. But some of the other information, which is your identity management for accessing your bank portal, from the mobile banking perspective or your mobile wallet access. I think these are going to be very, very critical for you to understand that that's the data which is already residing on your endpoints, and how are we going to manage this. I mentioned here actually in the previous slide broadband, but essentially actually is broadband and the mobility combined, if you ask me, because the broadband actually is, I'm taking it as a whole, which is wireline as well as wireless both. Okay. Essentially the big data explosion is posing these 4 areas from the challenge perspective: volume, variety, velocity, and veracity. Again, I don't want to get deeper into this. We'll, as the forum goes ahead, I think we'll discuss more in depth. But what I just want to say here is that the volume cannot be really measured small or big or medium, right? If you talk about the SCADA and telemetry applications which are going to run on the IoT perspective, the data might be small, but data is extremely sensitive when it comes to the value. Okay, if you're talking about a power generation company, that's SCADA and telemetry data in case if it is going to come as a critical system infrastructure for the country. Or even you're talking about the individual citizens, you're talking about a car throwing the data back in terms of the health of the car, and in case if somebody is willing to hack or are able to penetrate into that, the impact can be seen in different ways, but essentially it is all about the big data challenge. And what is this actually, these 4 V's are really heading us for? These are actually heading us for the cloud adoption, because I don't think anybody can build their own data centers on their own. So naturally hybrid is going to be the way. Your own data center as well as the cloud adoption, both. And it's going to be again application based or infrastructure based or even software as a service kind of consumption. Essentially it poses the challenge on these 4 or 5 areas of this particular. So big data challenge, which I mentioned as a step 1. Second will be the big data getting adopted actually as cloud, which is hybrid between your own data centers as well as the cloud providers. And this is going to really lead into these challenges. Now, the challenges actually are revolving around various areas, right? And if you look at skill in India, is revolving around these particular areas as well. And that is the point to be noted. Okay, so security, because I represent, of course, the semantic here, and so naturally I have to speak much more on security, and that's going to be the forte of our today's agenda as well for the whole day. I've just taken one small example here to depict what challenges we are going to go through from the overall transformation perspective. This example is from the banking perspective. If you look at the consumer banking revolution, and if you look at 2003, 94% of the transactions were happening through the check. If you look at 2010, and if you look at now the year 2020, are these going to be the alternative channels? No. These are going to be the key channels for us to transact. I don't think most of us would have gone even to the branch in last couple of years, perhaps. Okay, because we've been transacting actually either using your endpoint like a mobile or a PC, right? The whole idea here is that this particular revolution is going to put and pose a lot of challenges for all of us, and that's where today's agenda comes back into picture, which is cybersecurity framework. 4 areas which I just want to highlight here. Threat protection. What is threat protection? Threat protection actually is whatever is bad, don't allow them to come inside your organization. Information protection. Don't allow anything which is good, which is your own IP, sitting inside the organization. Don't allow that to go out. This applies even to the individuals as well, like us. Our username password, which we are trying to access our own banking portal or even citizen services portals, we should not be allowing that information to go out. That is also information protection as well. The third area is, of course, the analytics and the security operations. And that's what I think cybersecurity is essentially talking about, that when you apply the threat information and the information protection solutions, how are you going to operate them? And this is becoming very, very critical. Analytics per se is becoming critical because big data is throwing also a lot of challenges on the security as well. So security analytics is becoming very, very, very key. Cyber espionage or cyber crime or cyber war. These are the 3 key, I think, words which were used by Mr. Burman. And if you look at the impact of these 3 words, they go actually, in a very sequential way. And the impact on the cyber war is going to be actually much, much bigger. So it is already everybody is talking about that the next war, world war, may be completely bloodless because it might be done, on cyber itself. So the question is, how are we going to look at this particular framework and what needs to be done here? So number one, I think we should look at the advanced threats. You should look at about your controlling your own cloud infrastructure, which includes your data center as well. Let me just take to the last point, which is the securing ways, because I'm sure Shiva is going to buzz me now. So the last point actually is essentially nothing but IoT. And that's going to be, so whatever actually has happened due to the internet in last 15 years, I'm 100% confident that the next 5 years, whatever actually will happen because of IoT. Okay, so the difference is that what we saw in 15 years, we have to see perhaps the next transformation in the next 5 years, which is going to be the IoT. Now, these are the, some of the areas which I want you to take a note of it, because this is how people are looking at it, how to secure your endpoints, look at your advanced threat protection, areas, look at your server protection from the data center and clouds, look at the information protection, which is all your internal IP. And the best example here for that is Panama Papers. I don't have to say anything else because I don't think it was a hack. It was clearly somebody just kept the doors open and somebody then just took the information out and it just leaked out. So I think, it is also becoming very important. When we talk about cybersecurity, we talk about how threat is coming in, but we normally don't look at whatever is we are protecting as our whole information or the IP, intellectual property. How are we protecting that on our own? The next one is, of course, threat intelligence and the cyber monitoring. Threat intelligence is very, very important because that gives actually a lot of time to prepare. It's like military intelligence, or you're talking about even a civil intelligence perspective. In case if somebody says that, okay, a social media monitored riots can take place, but in case if you know something well in advance, perhaps you can have enough time in your hand to prepare for it. And that's what the intelligence gives you in your hand. It's not about just detection. It's also about how well prepared you are, and do you have that much time in your hand. And that is all comes actually from the threat intelligence perspective.
Shrikant, 30 seconds, please.
Thank you. Last 2 bullets. This is the last slide, Shiva, just for information. So, of course, the asset management and governance risk compliance is becoming also very, very important for all of us as part of the cybersecurity framework. And the last and not the least, I think Dr. Burman talked about embedded security and anomaly detection. These are the 2 other areas which I would like to just highlight. So I think this is what I wanted to just depict in my 8 to 9 minutes. Shiva, thank you very much for giving me the time and giving me the opportunity. Thanks a lot.
Thanks. Thanks, Shrikant. Just to correct it, it's 11 and a half minutes. Anyway, that's okay. It's my job to do it. Thank you. We started with the Secure by Design to creating a framework. How do we secure? Let me invite the next speaker, Debu Nayak, who is the Chief Security Officer of Huawei India, to really understand how this really works. From design to framework to real management of it. Debu, over to you.
Thank you. Thank you, Shiva. Good afternoon to all of you. The topic given to me is emerging technology in cyber security and mobile security. Being ICT providers, we must not scare all the people sitting in this hall. ICT has changed the life of all of us. If you see nowadays, each time I go to, especially China, because I'm working in a Chinese company, my son told, Papa, bring that toy, bring that toy, bring that toy. So I have to bring a full of toy in my bag. But when this time I brought an iPad for him or a gadget, he is not asking me any toy for me. So that means technology is really impacting not only us, even the childs, those are coming into place. Let's say I'll focus the 3 technologies that will change the whole scenario for the next 10 years. One is called as the mobile technology. That is the mobile technology coming is LT. The LT technology is called as the mobile broadband. You can get gig speed in your hand when actually you use the mobile technologies. If you see the mobile technology, it is all IP based. And all the interfaces you have to need to be secure. It is not that easy technology that you are going to make it secure. When the 4th generation standard development is taking place, they have to find out each and every element that is coming in 3GPP, they are finding how actually we'll make it secure. We are working as an equipment provider, we sometimes work with a lot of other equipment providers and we have to see how actually we'll work together and provide this security. So we provide with all the operators and also we provide some kind of consultants to them, how actually we can work together and provide the security aspect of it. Each and every equipment here you will see is embedded with a lot of security aspect on it. And the second factor you will find out whether I will do the operations, whether I will go to find the customer data in the CDR formats, or whether I will find out what is my critical privacy information that is going to the particular carriers. Each and everything need to be taken care. So basically, the complete security solution, what exactly we are designing, we are segregated into 3-dimensional, 3-plane mode. And based on this, we are dividing all these security paradigms and we are embedding the security system each and every planes so that in the each and every plane, you have number of dimensions are existing. If you see 15 years back when I was in ITU working in the cyber security group, that time I was find the ITU X.805 model was evolving. So I was the key contributor in that time. But that paradigm is changing. So you have to find out how actually the 8x8, 64 dimensions you need to be secure in the mobile space if you want to the mobile is really making an impact to you. So that's why we are designing all these security features in all our equipments. We have a mobile security center where actually 120 engineers working day and nights, and we are spending a lot of money to build these centers so that we are coming with 5G security, and the security will be inbuilt in the product. It is not add-on in the product. So in the transport layer also you need to have put the security mechanism into place because maximum payloads is transfer in the transport layers. So whether you provide the adequate certificates or you have to take care of those aspects that need to be taken care of when actually it is passes to the transport layers. So major challenges is coming now when it is going for SDN, the software network that is coming. When the SDN factors is coming, you will find out a lot of things are now hardware transferring towards the software modes. The moment it is transferring to the software modes, you will find out the control is now again getting transferred from one device to the central devices. So what extent I will put my device one control and what other controls are converging to other devices, that also need to be taken care. when actually your security parameters has to be controlled. So when you are moving from one station to another stations, your base stations you are changing. If you are changing your base station, does your security context is moving or it is still residing in the AAA server? So those kind of paradigm shifts are coming in the software-defined networking, where actually you will find out major hardware changes are happening and the major shift will happen to the softwares. Again, we integrated this kind of model in the ITU models because we believe in the standards. Because of standard we are existing. So we have to find out what layer actually we have to give protection to the various mechanism that has to take care of all our equipments. But it is not the software which is now changing the paradigm. The other factor is changing the paradigm. It's called as a network function virtualization. In the software, the functions are getting virtualized. Is my firewall is filtering my IP address? Where is my IP address if my function is traveling from one firewall to another firewall? How can I filter all these things? How can I make my IP control there? How can I put my access control list when my access control list itself is transferring in a virtualized mode? So those kind of new technology changes are coming, and that we are extensively working with from the beginning so that we can take care of those things in our product, and it is not an easy to penetrate those kind of products if somebody has some basic hygienic targeting mechanism they have. So another factor, I told you that SDN, NFV, and the another factor which is coming is cloud. So these three will change the paradigm shift in the mobile world. Cloud also you will find out whenever your identity is there, where actually your identity is going, how much you have find out what extent the identity is used by other people. What extent you are using your banking identity and it has been gone to the cloud, how actually you will take care of those things. But all the banking transactions is now happening into all the carriers, all the operators, and they are moving to the cloud, and that has to be taken care. Whether it's a private cloud, whether it's a public cloud, or they are going for hybrid cloud mechanism, all this need to be put in the mechanism, and security will play paramount impact. So in the Gartner, they told 79% of concern coming from cloud is the security. Other factors are there, but this is most important thing we have to need when actually we'll move to the next generation security. So also I have to cover the topic given is cyber security. In the cyber security, I have just choose one topic. One is called as the supply chain aspects. Is it that I am providing the box, I am owning all the technologies? You take a box, you split the box into different parts, in the blades, in the technologies, you will find out it is not by a single company. It is not even owned by a single country. So in this kind of environment, how we will find out we can put a cyber security, supply chain cyber security mechanism into place so that we will own these things and we will take care of these things. Recently we published in the paper in the June in London, and we asked all the world community, please come together and work together so that we can find out where actually we can provide the supply chain security. So we have designed our baselines, starting from the vendor we choose till we find out all these things, and then we find out how actually we'll take care of the supply chain security into a mechanism. So we have put some yardsticks, but as it is not internationally standardized, the supply chain security mechanism, so we have to go a long way. All the stakeholders need to be work together so that the supply chain mechanism and the supply chain security has to be taken care so that we can find out a foolproof equipment. Since I belong to this company, I just want to make one about this, my company. Our founder has told that no commercial interest will be given importance if the cyber security is coming into play. So there I comes. If any kind of cyber security related matter comes, I have to overrule the commercial aspect of it. I have to take care of the local rule and regulations. So India is a key country. That's why we have a chief cyber security officer who take care of these things, and we have to find out how actually we can work this. So before saying a thank you, we just want to say thank you to these bodies. We work extensively with all the international communities. We have very standard peoples almost 5,000 standard engineers are working all across the bodies, and they want to work closely and monitor the cyber security standards coming, and that will make impact to us. And that will shape how actually we'll integrate more and more things to our product, and our product more to be cyber security compliance, and it should be international compliance. So I'll just take half a second before concluding this. I'll just say one example my father used to give me, but I will say in Hindi, even if my Hindi is a little poor. एक दिन क्या हुआ रहा ना, एक बंदा ने एक मछली पकड़ रहा था, वहाँ पे वो सो गया. यहाँ पे एक फॉरेनर, दैट टाइम द इंग्लिश पीपल यूज्ड टू डू द सर्वे, उसने जाके वो बंदा को बोला, रहे ये बंदा दिन में क्यों सो रहा है? तो उसको उठा के बोला, आप क्यों सो रहे हो? बोला, सर मैं मछली पकड़ लिया सुबह और बेच दिया, अभी सो गया. बोला, अभी तो फिर मछली पकड़ सकते. बोला, पकड़ के क्या करता सर? बोलता, पकड़ के बेचता. बोलता, बेच के क्या करता? अरे आईपॉड खरीद करता. बोला, आईपॉड खरीद कर क्या करता? अच्छा घर बनता. अच्छा घर बन के क्या करता? एसी एयर कंडीशन लगाता. तो एयर कंडीशन लगा के सर क्या करता? ना उसमें आराम से सोता. बोला, सर अभी तो मैं आराम से सो रहा था. So that means why my father give this example to me is I am going to live in that kind of world, or I am going to live in a world where technology is changing my life. I have to live in this technology world. Cyber security, of course, is a factor, and the experts and the technology providers will take care of this. And we are born and brought up in a technology world, so let us use the technology and let us rejoice the technology. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Debu. I think we have long way to go to sleep. Before that, we have to eat. But having said that, let me, call upon our next speaker, Samuel Satyajit, Country Manager, India and SOC, Arbor. Again, my honest request is please limit your time because we are really running late. Satyajit, over to you.
Good afternoon, esteemed guests on the panel here and all the delegates. With 33% cut in the budget time, I endeavor to speak a little bit about defending the cyber threat attack campaigns. Although its intention is good with making it an interactive session.
That 15 minutes never existed. If I add together the total time, it is 1 hour 35 minutes, whereas here it's 1 hour 15 minutes a session. Sorry for that.
Yeah, I'll endeavor to do so, Siva. Well, so I would, as many of the speakers prior to this session as well, emphasize the fact of human role in the race of conflict, especially the cyber conflict. Basically, I want to emphasize this particular thing when we're speaking of the cyber security and the cyberspace as such. Probably the cyberspace is the largest system in the history of the mankind. Thus, half the population is currently on internet, so as is growing exponentially. The data which I picked it up, and it's dynamically yesterday I picked up, so probably it's changed significantly. But also, note that this also gives an undue advantage to the cyber criminals. They enjoy an undue advantage of unreachable advantages, as alluded by my earlier speakers as well, that you're in an environment where it's hard to and technically difficult to identify them. They are very talented, most important, and it's much more difficult to legally process. So we are emphasizing the role of humans in the cyber conflict as well. So we are talking of a scenario where an attacker resides in country A, using an innocent bots spread across country B to country D to country E, using relays and hops located in various other geographies, and reaching a victim in country V. And we are talking of this in order to identify. Dr. Gulshan Roy spoke about this, as well as spoke about the percentage of humans involved where the technology is involved. So what we are talking of is the protecting of the 3 pillars. All these 3 pillars are key to security, the confidentiality, integrity, and availability in the security triad. the game is changing. The fact is, the advanced threat have evolved from a malware attack to campaign-based attacks. Attack campaigns are organized human campaigns using multiple tools and techniques simultaneously. That's an adversary targeting a victim using capabilities over a certain infrastructure over a period of time. So, the attack campaigns are the real threat today. The old threat of the malwares have moved to a very sophisticated campaign-based attacks, a blend of tools simultaneously used with a specific campaign and a target in mind. So our approach has to change. The question here is again the role of the humans here. While the attacker is smart, so what do we need to do? Detect and respond? Is it working? Or do you find and contain as soon as possible? So the time to take to identify and contain is what very key. So these are some of the kill chain which is used by an attacker, which is successful when you do a detection analysis from a recce or reconnaissance to weaponization all the way to his final objectives. So you need to, how soon do you identify before the command and control takes it? If you look at the anatomy of an attack campaign, from a stage one when he enters your network to all the way to lateral movement, going on to the critical assets in the organization, and finally the stage 5 where it hands over to the command and control, and the final objective being achieved at the stage 5. So how soon do you hunt is the key here. Hunt the threat, the role of humans again, right? So how soon you identify and stop before stage 5 is crossed. See, it's almost given today that breach is inevitable. It's almost acceptable to a large extent. But exfiltration is not. Exfiltration is not acceptable. So what do we do in a scenario of this? Where there's a blended attacks go on, DDoS is being used as a smoke screen. We have changed the ideology behind DDoS, and the objective behind DDoS has changed significantly. We see the growth in the motivation of the DDoS attacks in order to cover exfiltration is growing significantly. We have seen many of the DDoS attacks used in multiple stages of the kill chain, where the availability threats like DDoS is being used to divert the attention, starting from assessing your security postures in preparation for later weaponization, moving on to the exfiltration, using diversion tactics and confusing the security incident response team to find the indicators of compromise or the breach. And finally, using the diversion mechanisms, which is equivalent to creating an alarm in an entirely different zone and heading away with the vault in a different gate altogether. So this is what we are talking of, some of the combination of DDoS and advanced threat tools which we have seen in the wild. I don't want to go into details about it. So some of the things which is also in terms of DDoS being used for extortion letters being sent out by various organizations. So this is some of the examples which they talk about ethical, taking away money and not coming back to attack, but still coming to do the attacks again. One of the key things which I wanted to highlight here in terms of the complexity of the attacks, right? We had seen over the period of time, scale of attacks increasing. We saw 325 gigs of attack in 2014, breaching to 334 in 2015. Last month, we had the first ever attacks breaching a 500 gig of attack, 579 Gbps to be precise, in June. So, while the attack size is increasing, the average size of attacks are also increasing. We have seen the average size of attack grow beyond a gig now. Also, where we have seen 100 gig scale of attack sporadic earlier, now we have seen a significant increase in 100 gig of attack and 200 gig scale of attacks. You might have heard recently about the very recent incident in Mumbai, which breached 200 gigs, bringing down the ISP network of the entire western sector, which has happened to the same customer only a year back and is a repeat of it. So some of the key findings I don't want to go in detail about here is the scale, complexity, the frequency, and sophistication is increasing ever and ever, every day. There are various open ports being used, including your wireless router, to NTP servers, to DNS servers being used for reflection amplification attack. The complexity is increasing, not just by the scale of attack, but a combination of multiple application layer attacks as well as volumetric attacks. So how do we really stop an attack which happened in the recent time? I didn't even hear the 8-minute buzz. Okay. So we need to stop a volumetric attack in the service provider, moving on to a complicated layer 7 attack at the data center. So some of the 5 points which I would like to highlight in terms of the security incident response: deployment of an early detection and forensic tools, integration of threat intelligence, as earlier speaker alluded to, into your incident response, improve the classification and prioritization process, which is the triage of it. What do you prioritize? Increase of OPSEC personnel and talent, and create a hunting team to proactively find indicators of compromise. So this is my last slide in terms of a comprehensive protection you need to have a threat intelligence with an integrated multi-layer from your service providers onto your data centers, onto your data centers. Thank you.
Thanks. Thanks, Samil. Without waiting for, let me call upon next speaker, Venkat Krishnapur, Head of Operations, India Engineering Center, and Head of Consumer Engineering, Intel Security. Venkat, with the request, same, 10 minutes, please.
Thanks. The advantage of coming last is most of what needs to be spoken is already spoken, right? So, a few years back, when I had to introduce myself, when you bump into people, I'd say, they ask you, who are you, where do you work? Introduce myself as Venkat Krishnapur, work for McAfee. And then, the response would be, oh, the virus company. And then I would have to tell them, hey, no, it's not a virus company, it's an antivirus company, right? And then, when you think about it, the solution, which is antivirus, was probably true when, in the 80s, when, the first virus was really discovered, 1981, the Elk Kroner, and surprisingly on an Apple system. And then in 86, we had the discovery of, the Pakistani Brain, which was the bigger virus then. At that point of time, you'd probably say, the kind of solutions you would have is just antivirus. But today, when you think about security, right, it's no longer about antivirus. We've come a long way in terms of, the kind of attacks that we are seeing today. So the 80s it was the basic virus, then we had the Trojans, and then we had, rootkits, and, all of these kind of, come in. And in 2000, the mid-2000 really saw the exploitation of the Microsoft operating system, the, Outlook, and, all of the vulnerabilities in that space. And that was the era of the super worms, right? So all of you would remember, I Love You in 2000. You would remember Anna Kournikova in 2001. You can think about, the Slammer virus, which exploited the SQL databases and brought the whole internet down in about 15 seconds, right? So those were the days of the super worms, and when you think about it from a solution standpoint, they were very visible. So you would come up with a signature, you would have a data out and contain that in let's say a few hours or a few days. And then as the network connectivity kept increasing, and the number of people who started coming on the internet kept increasing, right? So because of social, 2008, you saw the first attack on the social network, which was Scoopface, which was, if you reverse it, it's Facebook, right? And you started seeing the exploitation of, Microsoft started strengthening its operating systems, its databases, vulnerabilities, and all of that. So you started seeing a decreasing pattern in terms of, the attacks on the Windows system. And, 2008, 2010, you started, seeing an increase in the social network, an explosion in terms of the number of devices that you would start connecting to. That's when, you started seeing the mobile invasion, and so on and so forth, right? So the attack pattern, the landscape, as you can see, the threat landscape was constantly increasing. 2010 onwards, that was the period when literally the whole cyber attack or the creation of malware took on signs. No longer was it like in the old days where you would have guys in Russia sitting in the garage creating viruses for fame and name. These were significantly sophisticated attacks, right? Where they would not be visible, they would hide, they would move constantly. So you're talking about the advanced persistent threats where, the examples were 2010 Stuxnet, where the Iranians had to deal with a situation supposedly created by a couple of other states where, the turbines, the nuclear turbines were attacked, right? And then you have things like Shady Rat, and then Aurora, attacks coming in from China, which were extremely sophisticated, and that could be, that were very hard to detect, and the kind of patterns changed. And today, when you look at where we are in terms of the threat landscape, we are talking about, you look at McAfee Labs. Today, we receive about 500 samples every minute. This is about, our sample size in terms of the database that you're going to be looking at is over 500 million. And when you're looking at it, when you look at the connectivity, yesterday Facebook announced 1.7 billion people on social, right? So the threat landscape has gone up significantly. The number of devices have gone up significantly. The ability for hackers to get in, both on the corporate side as well as, for simple consumers, is significant. The opportunities are huge. So what do you do in these situations, right? So the traditional antivirus is not going to help. And, I'm going to be repeating a lot of the stuff that, the previous speakers spoke about. The first fundamental thing that is required in order to mitigate these risks, the fact that you're going to get attacked, the fact that you're going to, likely to have a breach is a given, right, in some shape or form. This is not a 100% solution. There's not a single company in the world today that will provide you that kind of, protection. So the first thing is really about gathering all the threat intelligence. So in the old world, you didn't even think about it. It's about how do you have a security connectedness that is so critical for information gathering. You need to pool a lot of information that comes in from different sources, from different databases, from different parts of the world. So there is this whole thing that you need to develop, which is the threat intelligence platform, right? But collect all the data, and then you're able to make a certain analysis in terms of what. And the next thing is about the security connectedness. Right? You need endpoints to be talking to servers, talking to another endpoint, and then each of these devices in turn are populating a certain database through which a certain amount of analysis that needs to happen in real time, big time. That's why you talk about big data analysis and all of that. So, and how do you differentiate with so much of information coming in so fast? How do you really differentiate between an indicator of attack and really be able to pick the right one. So we've moved from blacklisting technology. We started with blacklisting technology, which was really fingerprinting the regular DATs and the signatures for each of the malware samples that you would have. So it was a reactive solution. And then you moved on, you started realizing in 2000, when you're talking about 500 million samples, you're thinking about the size of database, how big are you going to have a DAT? That again began to pose problems, right? So you moved away from a reactive mode to, okay, how do I quickly determine something is malicious? So you went into a whitelisting mode. So what is whitelisting? So I know you, so I can let you in. Blacklisting, I don't know you, but I figured out that you're bad, so I don't let you in. And then today, what we're really straddling is not the black and the white. I think the black and the white are reasonably obvious. What we're really straddling is the gray. This is really the significant portion that needs to be dealt with. And that's where you need to bring in new technologies that will help you determine what that gray is. Because they're in your system, right? And that's where you begin to use behavioral analysis, you begin to use tracing and other technologies that will enable you to determine where the problem is. You need to have the ability to quarantine, you need to have the ability to do advanced threat detection that will also require you to isolate these samples and run them in real time and then understand the behavior and then figure out if something is really bad. And you're really trying to solve this needle in the haystack problem. So it's a significant issue. And when you're looking at it from a security standpoint, you need to have an open architecture that allows you to get all kinds of data. And then at the end of the day, it's about not only protecting yourself with traditional means of blacklisting and whitelisting. It's also about protecting yourself, with more sophisticated tools and techniques that will allow you to stay, as safe as you can possibly be. So I've already got a ping. So I think, I'm almost at the end of, my session. Fortunately, I didn't have slides, so I was able to manage my 10 minutes, I think. And like I said, most of what was already, what I had to say was already spoken. So thanks very much for your time and your patience. Thanks again.
Thank you. Thanks, Venkat. Thanks for closing it exactly at 10 minutes. Let me call upon our next and last speaker, Sundarraj Vijayanagar, CTO of Sri Equipment Finance Limited. Over to you, Mr. Sundarraj.
Thank you, Venkat. You were not the last. I have the, privilege of talking last, and as I said that, when you speak last, you have very little to speak. But what I feel is that, why I have been part of this panel is probably most of the panel members represent the technology solution providers. Probably I represent the user community where we, deploy the technology to achieve the end objective. So last several years have been a big journey while undertaking the digital transformation on one side. The other side is that how do we secure the assets, infrastructure and the people. Cyber attacks come from outside while the vulnerabilities are inside the infrastructure, and more often we see that the vulnerabilities come from the people within. Last year when I went abroad with my family, my kids used to just go and then access the Wi-Fi network wherever they would go and wherever they would get a Wi-Fi network. But I, being a very conservative CTO, I would refuse or hesitate to connect to the Wi-Fi that is provided, and you never know whether the Wi-Fi that is provided is a secured network or not a secured network. So it's very, very important for us to see that wherever it is possible, that we secure ourselves. That responsibility is there in our hand. But what is good thing that is happening is that over a period of time, we see more and more such summits are happening, and more deliberations are happening, and is very, very well, attended. But 3-4 months back in March, I went as a speaker to Dhaka for the SAARC Tech Summit. And even there also the subject matter is that how to deliver a secured, digital transformation to the organization. And to my surprise that, the CIO of Central Bank of Bangladesh was supposed to get ICT Excellence Award in that event. But just about 4 or 5 days before that event, we all know what happened to Central Bank of Bangladesh. And even despite the fact that he did such great job to be recognized as a ICT Excellence Award, eventually the Prime Minister of Bangladesh told that this award should not be given. Imagine the kind of threats that we CTOs and CIOs are going through, that no matter how much of good work you do, one incident can take away all the good work that you have done. So, if at all I have lost half my hair in the last 5 years, it is because of this worry about who is going to, what incident will happen and what will be its, repercussions on the company that you are working for, and the entire the industry that you are working for. But it's not going to help us by getting worked up with these kind of threads. All that we can do is that we, on a continual basis, evaluate, create an ecosystem. I mean, technology providers are doing wonderful job, and I really, as a user community head of one of the large organizations, IT, I respect the technology community who are day in and day out who are doing R&D and then coming out with newer and newer solution. But just getting new solutions into your organization is not going to assure the required security. You, as a head of IT or a IT manager, you have a responsibility to create an ecosystem. The ecosystem starts from your chairman till the last person in the hierarchy, the entire ecosystem, and you have to take buy-in from everyone and see that how these solutions get integrated. The AVs of the world, the firewalls of the world, the IPs of the world, the spam controls of the world, MDMs of the world. If you are having mobility, you got MDMs, all technologies. How do we put them together? We have faced a lot of problems. Moment you bring in a technology that will, make the entire network, make the entire application so sluggish that people would refuse to use the technology. So how do we protect this? And how do we ensure and work with the technologies support providers to achieve the bottom line, that ultimately enhancing your security architecture and reducing the vulnerabilities? Over a period of several years, we have taken a strategic decision that every 3 years we will subject our network into audit, and get the external consulting partners. And one more strategy is that change the consulting partners so that more and more partners will bring in their knowledge, and we will enhance and learn from their knowledge so that we can put together, enhance the security. So every 3 years, if not possible, every year or every 2 years, at least make sure that we subject ourselves and understand the vulnerabilities, and then set the entire, we set up an entire information risk governance and security function, and at least 10% of our IT manpower work in the security function, and ensure that they, on a continual basis, analyze the logs that these solutions that produces. And now, over a period of time, the log has become so voluminous that unless we use an analytical tool and have the security analyst working 24/7, I do not think that the solutions that come into picture would really benefit us, right? And the third is very important to budgetize. I am very happy that कि year on year my IT budget is coming down, but the security budget is increasing, and that is a very heartening situation that कि while IT budgets are cut, the security budgets are increasing. At least I am trying to get, and my management is good enough to give me 5 to 10% of my overall IT budget for the purpose of security. And I feel that one must put that budget in place and effectively utilize. And as we go forward, the past threats are over. You will get newer and newer threats, and you need to protect the organization for the newer threats. And imagine the mobile device itself has brought us enough headaches for us. Okay, but imagine what is going to happen future. Look at the IoT that is going to grow compared to the mobile devices. IoTs will be 10 times more than the mobile devices. Now what will be, and each of these devices are intelligent devices, they can communicate, and if that get hacked, what will happen? What about the number of variables that are going to go up? Today, more and more variables are coming. Your health data is there in the wearable that you are having, and that will get communicated to your doctor. And what will happen if your wearable is getting hacked? I don't think I need to pass this to you. I am not sitting here to pass the note. Okay, and finally, the drones. The last is the drones. So the wearables, the drones, and the IoTs are going to be the future headaches for people like us. And we need to be prepared for that, those threats as well. Thank you very much. I'm not going to take more time.
Thank you, Sundarraj. I would have loved to have questions from the audience, but we're already late by 15 minutes, and there's one more session before the lunch break. What I'm going to do is that to thank each of the participants, the panelists here, for the wonderful experience that they shared with all of us. They're going to be here, if not till the lunchtime.